Parecen cucarachas que se amontonan en la basura. Negros de mierda no sirven para nada y van derecho hacia la fisura. Negros de mierda, hay que desinfectarlos para no mancharse con su negrura. Si tenés...
Racist attitudes towards Afro-Ecuadorians plague the nation of Ecuador. We know about racism in places such as the United States, South Africa, and Europe. I view that my non-Hispanic colleagues think that Latin America is a region where all Hispanics live in harmony because everyone is Latino or Hispanic. However, that is not the case. Whether you are racist or not, one must realize that facts are facts and statistics are statistics. I chose to make a video with interviews and illustrations because for me, seeing can better put you in the shoes of this particular situation. I limited it to the Afro-Latin experience in Ecuador because I am a mulatto, Hispanic, Ecuadorian, and found a contemporary due to the recent devastating earthquake. Ecuador has a mulatto population of less than 0.4% due to the socialization that whites should not marry blacks. The Spanish brought slaves to South America from West Africa in the 16th century when the indigenous population decreased.
They were more about the bureaucracy of running this space that they have controlled. And sometimes, even though physical brutality, which is, one of the things that was, really horrible in terms of the slave trade, but sometimes when you organize a system so carefully and so methodically, that system has the potential to last much longer than a system where it's not organized as well, but it's based on physical brutality.
A slave ship en route to Peru crashed off the coast of Ecuador in the 17th century, thus giving birth to the Afro-Ecuadorian. Slavery was eventually abolished in the country in 1851. The regions of Esmeraldas and Valle de Chota are the two centers of Afro-Ecuadorian culture. Slavery to the present day, blacks have been viewed as nothing more than savages in Ecuador. An intellectual and social Darwinist Alfred Espinosa Tamayo regarded blacks as a biologically servile race that is the least suitable for incorporation into civilization. In this man's good and just society, blacks would be slaves due to natural selection, because they are not fit enough to advance in areas whites can. The results of his argument have had resonating effects on Ecuadorian society. Scholar Carlos de la Torre reports that Quiteño children are often taught to recite verses that say, "Quien quiera al hombre negro? Nadie. ¿Por qué? Porque es negro. ¿Qué come? Carne. ¿Qué bebe? Sangre." The verses literally translates to, "Who likes the black man? No one. Why? Because he is black. What does he eat? Meat. What does he drink? Blood." From a young age, mestizo and white children are socialized into thinking that blacks are cannibalistic savages.
Biology is not going to say what's good or bad, what's right or wrong. It just provides facts, and you have to use those facts to interpret, what you will about the topic. But it certainly does not tell you. There's certainly no superior inferior function in terms of race culture. There's certainly superior particular function of in a very very basic biological sense. A particular protein might be more superior versus another one in terms of just in pure of like an enzymatic process. An enzyme can work faster than another enzyme. So okay, you can argue that enzyme is maybe superior than another one. But in an entire organism, looking at it in the entire organism, I don't think it would be illogical to try to say, oh, you have a particular enzyme that might be more efficient at metabolizing, or might be more efficient at blood clotting. There will certainly be differences in the genes that are influenced by the particular geographical regions. So, someone say, directly from Africa versus someone who has, migrated to say, South America or Latin, in Central America regions. Over time, those their genes, or the frequencies of certain traits may change, but as a whole, the genome is not. The genome is still, will be considered Homo sapien.
A study conducted by the University of Texas School of Law found that Afro-Ecuadorians are deprived of land rights in spite of the social contract of the 2008 Ecuadorian Constitution. Many of them could not enjoy their land in Esmeraldas and the Valle del Chota due to commercialized shrimping, cruel environmental practices of the logging and palm oil industries, and ongoing border violence from Colombia. Statistics from the study concluded that 16.8% of the Afro-Ecuadorian population is illiterate. 9.17% of the Afro-Ecuadorians have had 12 or more years of school, and 15.8% of Afro-Ecuadorians suffer from chronic malnutrition. In the Valle del Chota, 60% of communities lack a health center, and hacienda-owning mestizos take up 80% of the irrigated water of this region. Afro-Ecuadorians internalize their oppression. Researcher De La Torre observed that Afro-Ecuadorians consider talking about racism and race taboo, yet are aware about their respective existences. The next step after awareness is action, but due to inferiority, they do not have movements such as Black Lives Matter in the United States.
Let's keep them voiceless. Right? Invisibility is you don't have a voice. You don't have a political leg to stand on. Right? You marginalize a group enough, right, where you create for a permanent working class body of people that others don't see in terms of their function, and value that work and value that function, you can exploit that body. Right? To be invisible is to be voiceless.
So if they're invisible, and all of a sudden, like, you hear that something is happening to this invisible being, there's no empathy. So there's no reason for want of change.
Apart from the veiled racism, explicit racism happens when political campaigns use racially charged songs such as the one you heard, and when people use phrases like tratado como negro, which means treated like a black person, the later referring to someone who has been treated badly in the workforce. Over 90% of Afro-Ecuadorians do not have access to basic services, and many will eventually become fishermen or work in hard labor. Many black children dream of playing professional soccer, yet only 10 out of thousands make it there. Mestizo's racist comments are a form of projection which needs to stop. The social evil of hypocrisy manifests itself this way. Many times I hear mestizo Ecuadorians say that they are not racist, yet refer to black stereotypes of thievery. If blacks do steal, it is because they have no other option to feed their families. Blacks account for the highest amount of unemployment, lack of education, and infrastructure in Ecuador. Stereotyping an Afro-Ecuadorian as an aggressive, lazy thief is like stereotyping an African-American as a drug-dealing criminal. In order to solve these race-related problems, a society would need to implement color consciousness and preferential option for the marginalized. A form of this can simply be to play more marimba and bamba music on the radio. These forms of cultural expression must not go unnoticed. Mestizos must stop exercising hypocrisy because blacks aid mestizos whenever physical labor needs to be done. Equality and respect are exercised when Afro-Ecuadorians attain the human rights of clean water, shelter, and ample food. If they fall into a lower social class, they will not be discriminated against, yet be empowered to seek advancement. Liberation will come when interracial relationships are not a stigma anymore. One cannot simply change the way a person has thought their entire life, but one can educate the future generations and challenge them to think otherwise. Schools in Ecuador should not be afraid to talk about race, ways to end racism, and promote a common respect. I would build historically black colleges and universities like those in the United States with federal money to serve this designated community in order to decrease the low education level plight. In my good and just society, the Afro-Ecuadorian community will be able to be in solidarity with members of the African community around the world and hear each other's common struggles.
Afro-Ecuadorians, Afro is more accurate to their historical origins and roots. That's not lost. There's a one-to-one relationship that's still shared, right? That's because there's not the level of the same kind of breeding that takes place in America. The one-to-one slave trade is very palpable. Those lines are still drawn, right? And so, yes, it speaks to their story. And if that's the way in which they want to be identified, you have to give them that right. You got to give them that service.